My grandson slapped me across the face and my son just laughed. My daughter-in-law clapped. That day I said nothing. But 3 weeks later, they got a letter from the school that left them speechless. You ever have one of those moments where time just stops, like your brain hits pause because it can't quite believe what your eyes just saw? That was me right there in my own living room on a warm Georgia afternoon, standing a few feet away from my 10-year-old grandson Thomas, who had just slapped me across the face. Yes, slapped. Not one of those playful little pats kids do when they're being silly. No, this was a full-handed stinging slap that landed so hard my pearl earring actually fell out. I remember feeling the heat spread across my cheek. That sharp, shocking burn that comes when your body realizes you've just been disrespected in a way you never imagined. And then came the laughter. My son Richard, sitting right there on the couch with his phone in his hand, looked up, smirked, and actually laughed. "He's just playing with you, Mom," he said, like this was some kind of family comedy sketch instead of pure humiliation. And Amanda, my daughter-in-law, the self-proclaimed queen of modern parenting, she clapped her hands together and said, "If you're so tough, hit him back, but you won't dare." I stood there frozen, my mind spinning, my heart pounding in my chest like it was trying to break out. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said quietly, "It's okay." But it wasn't. Not even close. Something deep inside me cracked that day. Something I didn't even know could break after 65 years of holding this family together through every storm life threw at us. I walked to the kitchen, pretending to tidy up just so I wouldn't have to look at them. They went right back to laughing and scrolling through their phones like nothing had happened, like it was normal to watch your grandmother get smacked in the face by a 10-year-old. And in that moment, I realized something painful. I had become invisible in my own house. I was the live-in babysitter, the unpaid maid, the woman they tolerated because I cooked and helped with bills. The grandma who doesn't understand modern parenting. That's what Amanda once called me. But that day, that slap reminded me of something I'd forgotten. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't powerless. I was just quiet. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat in my little room at the end of the hall. The moonlight came through the blinds, landing right on a framed photo of baby Thomas the day he was born. I remember holding him in that picture, his tiny fingers gripping my necklace, my heart bursting with love. I'd called him my little sunshine, and looking at that picture now with my cheek still faintly red, I whispered, "You were my sunshine once." My eyes stung, but not from tears, from the ache of realizing how much had changed. I thought about Richard, my only son. I raised him on my own after his father passed. I worked 2 jobs, missed meals, saved every dime so he could have the life I never did. And now here I was being laughed at in my own home by him and his wife because I was too sensitive to a slap. I took a deep breath and reached for my laptop. I wasn't looking for comfort or distraction. No, I knew exactly what I was about to do. You see, for the past 3 years, I'd been quietly paying for Thomas's private school. Every month, without fail, I transferred the money from the savings account my late husband Robert had left me. It wasn't something I bragged about. I never asked for thanks. I did it because I believed in education and because I wanted Thomas to have the best. I wanted him to grow up kind, humble, and smart, not spoiled and cruel. But as I opened my online banking that night and saw that tuition draft sitting there ready for next month's payment, something in me shifted. That money wasn't helping him. It was feeding their arrogance. I stared at that number for a long while, sipping my cold chamomile tea, thinking about all the nights I'd gone without new clothes or skipped vacations so I could afford that tuition. For what? So they could raise a boy who thought hitting grandma was a joke. No, not anymore. I scrolled to the cancel recurring payment button and hovered over it for a moment. My heart pounded in my ears. I could almost hear Robert's voice, calm, steady, like he used to sound when he'd say, "You've got to teach people how to treat you, Margaret." My finger trembled for just a second. Then I clicked. Payment canceled. Just like that, the decision was made. And an odd sense of calm washed over me. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. For years, I'd been the peacekeeper, the quiet fixer. Whenever there was tension in the house, I'd smooth it over. When Amanda snapped, I'd bite my tongue. When Richard ignored me, I'd tell myself he's busy. I thought keeping the peace meant keeping the family together. But peace built on disrespect isn't peace. It's surrender. I closed the laptop and sat there in the dark, listening to the soft hum of the air conditioner and the distant sound of a television still on in the living room. Somewhere in the house, I could hear Thomas's laughter, carefree, innocent. and for a moment I almost regretted what I'd done. Almost. But then I touched my cheek, the faint bruise still warm under my fingertips, and I remembered the sound of my son's laughter right after that slap. That sound would echo in my mind for a long time. As I turned off the lamp and lay down, a strange thought crossed my mind. Maybe this wasn't punishment. Maybe it was a lesson one they didn't know they needed yet. And as I drifted off to sleep, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not sadness, not anger, but strength. Quiet, steady strength. The kind that doesn't scream or slam doors. The kind that simply says enough. Little did they know the lesson was already in motion. In a few short weeks, when that tuition bill came due and no payment arrived, when the fancy private school sent that little white envelope marked Notice of Termination, they'd finally understand respect isn't something you can buy. It's something you earn. The next morning, the house smelled like cinnamon waffles and new beginnings. Or at least that's what Amanda called it. She was buzzing around the kitchen like a bee with a phone glued to her hand, taking photos of Thomas's back-to-school outfit for her followers. "He's going to look so sharp. My little man ready for 4th grade," she said in that sing-song voice she uses when she's performing for social media. Thomas stood there posing like he was in a commercial, his slick new backpack still with the tag dangling off the side. I sat at the kitchen table, stirring my tea, slowly watching the whole show unfold. This was their normal now. Everything for the likes, the followers, the comments. Sometimes I wondered if they ever just lived a moment without documenting it. Richard came in, grabbed a waffle, kissed Amanda quickly, and ruffled Thomas's hair. "Looking good, buddy. You're going to crush it this year," he said, then glanced at me with a brief, "Morning, Mom," before going back to his phone. I nodded, smiled, and kept stirring my tea. 3 weeks. That's how long it would take for them to realize what I'd done. 3 weeks of silence, of pretending nothing had changed. 3 weeks of them not noticing I'd stopped talking about the future, stopped offering to babysit, stopped trying to please. Time is a funny thing when you're waiting for a storm to hit. It stretches and compresses all at once. Those 3 weeks crawled by in a fog of routine. Make breakfast, clean up, watch Thomas after school, make dinner, clean up, repeat. The only difference was inside me. I moved through each day with a secret, a decision that was already reshaping our lives, though they didn't know it yet. I caught Thomas watching me, sometimes a curious look in his eyes, like he sensed something had shifted but couldn't quite place it. Once he came into the kitchen while I was washing dishes and just stood there shifting from foot to foot. "Grandma," he said, his voice small. "Are you mad at me?" I turned, dried my hands on a dish towel, and looked at him. Really looked at him. Behind the designer clothes and the carefully styled hair was still a little boy. A little boy who'd been taught that disrespect was funny, that humiliation was entertainment. That wasn't his fault. Not really. "No, Thomas, I'm not mad at you," I said, meaning it. "But I am disappointed in what happened." He frowned, confused. "You mean when I slapped you? Dad said it was just a joke." "And do you think it was funny?" I asked quietly. He looked down at his sneakers, fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. "I guess not, but Mom laughed. She said it would be good for her channel." My heart sank. So that was it. I was content for Amanda's social media. The perfect viral moment. Watch my son slap his old-fashioned grandma. I could see the comments now, the laughing emojis, the shares. How many likes was my dignity worth? How many followers justified turning my grandson into the kind of person who thinks hurting others is entertainment? "Thomas," I said gently, kneeling down despite my arthritic knees protesting, "would you like it if someone slapped you and then laughed about it?" His eyes widened and he shook his head quickly. "No, that would hurt." "Yes, it would. Both your face and your feelings, right?" He nodded, a flicker of understanding crossing his young face. "I'm sorry, Grandma. I didn't think about it like that." I hugged him. Then this complicated little boy caught between what his parents were teaching him and what he innately knew was right. "Thank you for that, sunshine. That means a lot to me." For a brief moment, I saw a glimpse of the Thomas I used to know, the one who would crawl into my lap for stories, who would pick dandelions from the yard and present them to me like precious gems. Maybe all wasn't lost. Maybe there was still time to course correct. But that moment of connection was fleeting. Amanda called him away for more photos, more poses, more performance. And our conversation was forgotten, at least for them. I tucked it away in my heart, a small glimmer of hope in the fog of disappointment. The next day, I was in the backyard hanging laundry when I overheard them through the open kitchen window. Amanda was giving Thomas instructions, her voice animated and excited. "Just try to get her really worked up," she was saying. "Ask about politics or something. Old people always get crazy about that stuff. We could do a whole series, Grandma Gone Wild or something. The algorithm loves multi-part content." I froze a damp sheet halfway to the clothesline. They were planning to provoke me to film my reactions for entertainment. The sheet slipped from my fingers, landing in a heap on the grass. I felt sick. This wasn't just about one slap anymore. This was a pattern, a deliberate exploitation. I was nothing more than content to them a character to poke and prod for views. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I'd been naive, thinking it was just one thoughtless moment. This was calculated. I picked up the sheet, hung it with trembling hands, and finished the laundry in a daze. When I came back inside, Amanda quickly put her phone down and smiled too brightly. "Oh, Margaret, we were just talking about you. Thomas has some questions about how things were back in your day. Don't you, Thomas?" Thomas looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. Yeah. Like, what did you think about the Vietnam War, Grandma?" I looked at them both, Amanda with her phone casually placed on the table, clearly recording, and Thomas with his rehearsed question and wary eyes. Instead of anger, I felt a profound sadness wash over me. "I think," I said carefully, "that's a conversation for another time, when we're just talking to each other, not to an audience." Amanda's smile faltered. "What do you mean?" "I mean I'd be happy to talk about history with Thomas when it's about learning, not about creating viral content." Her face flushed, caught out. "It's just a fun video series. Everyone does this kind of thing now." "Not everyone," I said simply and walked out of the room. That night I checked my bank account again, making sure the cancellation had gone through. It had. In 2 more weeks, the truth would come out. Part of me wanted to tell them now to end this charade. But another part, a wiser part, knew that some lessons need to be discovered, not delivered. They needed to feel the consequences of their actions, not just hear about them. I thought about Thomas's apology in the kitchen, how quickly it had been swallowed up by Amanda's influence. One moment of clarity wasn't enough. He needed to see a real shift to understand that actions have consequences beyond a forced sorry. The days continued their slow march forward. Richard barely noticed anything had changed, too absorbed in his work and his phone to see the growing distance between us. Amanda grew increasingly frustrated with my refusal to participate in her video schemes, but she masked it with passive-aggressive comments about how I just didn't understand modern culture. Thomas, though, he noticed. He started spending more time in the kitchen with me, asking real questions about baking and my childhood, no phone in sight. It was as if our moment of honesty had opened a door, however slightly. One afternoon, he helped me make Robert's favorite chocolate chip cookies, carefully measuring flour and cracking eggs with intense concentration. "Dad never has time to do stuff like this," he said unprompted. "He's always working or looking at his phone." The simple observation broke my heart. "Your grandfather always made time," I said, showing him how to fold in the chocolate chips. No matter how busy he was at the factory, he'd come home and be fully present with us. "What does fully present mean?" Thomas asked, licking batter from his finger despite my playful swat. "It means when he was with us, he was really with us, not thinking about other things or half listening. He made us feel like we were the most important people in his world." Thomas considered this, his young face serious. "I don't think I've ever seen Dad fully present." Out of the mouths of babes. The truth hit with such clarity it took my breath away. Richard had become so consumed by chasing success, by keeping up appearances, that he'd forgotten to actually live the life in front of him. And Amanda was no better, turning every moment into content rather than connection. In my sadness over being disrespected, I'd missed the larger tragedy. My son and his wife were teaching Thomas to do the same. To value appearance over substance, followers over family content over connection. The cookies went into the oven, filling the kitchen with a sweet, familiar smell. As Thomas and I waited, sitting at the table with glasses of milk, he asked me something that stopped my heart. "Grandma, if I'm bad, will you stop loving me?" I set my glass down carefully. "Thomas, look at me. Nothing you could ever do would make me stop loving you. Nothing." His eyes filled with unexpected tears. "But you don't smile at me like you used to, ever since I slapped you." Oh, this child. This perceptive, sensitive child trapped in a house of performers and pretenders. "I was hurt," I admitted. "Not just my face, but my heart. Because I know you're better than that. You're kind and thoughtful, and that person who slapped me, that wasn't the real you." He nodded, blinking back tears. "Mom said it would be funny, that everyone would laugh." "And how did it feel when everyone laughed?" He thought for a moment. "Weird. Bad weird. Like I did something wrong but was getting praised for it. Wisdom from a 10-year-old. Trust that feeling, Thomas. That's your conscience telling you what's right and wrong. Sometimes adults forget to listen to that little voice." The timer dinged, saving us from more heavy conversation. As we pulled out perfect golden cookies, Thomas's face lit up with genuine pride. No cameras, no audience, just pure accomplishment. And for that brief moment, everything felt right. But nothing gold can stay, as Robert used to say. The bubble burst when Amanda swept into the kitchen phone, first as always, immediately directing Thomas to pose with the cookies for her Homemade Moments series. The joy drained from his face, replaced with that practiced smile I'd grown to hate. And just like that, a real memory was transformed into content. Later that week, I found a small note pushed under my bedroom door. In Thomas's crooked handwriting, it simply said, "I like real moments with you better than pretend ones for Mom's videos." I folded it carefully and placed it in my jewelry box next to Robert's wedding ring and the lock of Richard's baby hair. Some treasures can't be captured in pixels, can't be measured in likes or shares. As the third week drew to a close, a tension began to build in the house. Like animals before a storm, we all sensed something was coming. I caught Richard checking the mail, anxiously frowning as he shuffled through bills. The school year was about to start, and final tuition payments would be due. The moment of truth arrived on a Tuesday morning. I was washing breakfast dishes when I heard the mail slot clatter. Richard got there first, as he had been doing all week. I didn't need to see his face to know he'd found it. The letter from Westfield Academy. His sharp intake of breath told me everything. "Mom," he called, his voice tight with panic. "Did you forget something this month?" I dried my hands slowly, took a deep breath, and turned to face my son. Amanda hurried into the room, alerted by his tone. "What's going on?" she demanded, then saw the letter in his hand. "Is that from Westfield?" Richard nodded, his face pale. "They're saying Thomas's tuition hasn't been paid, that his enrollment will be terminated if it's not paid within 48 hours. Amanda snatched the letter from him, her eyes scanning frantically. "What they can't do, that school starts next week. Mom?" Richard turned to me, confusion and anxiety battling on his face. "Did you forget the tuition payment? The moment stretched between us, taut as a wire. 25 years of motherhood. 65 years of life, all coming down to this quiet reckoning in a suburban kitchen on a Tuesday morning." I dried my hands with the dish towel, folded it neatly, and looked him dead in the eye. "No, Richard," I said, my voice calm, steady, deliberate. "I didn't forget. I canceled it." The room went so silent you could have heard the refrigerator humming. Amanda's jaw dropped open so wide she could have caught flies. "You what?" she screeched, her voice cracking like glass. "Do you have any idea how hard it is to get him into that school?" I shrugged. "Oh, I do. I also know it's even harder to teach a child respect when the adults around him laugh at cruelty." Amanda blinked, speechless for once. Richard's face went pale, the kind of pale that comes when you realize the person you thought was soft just drew a line you didn't see coming. "Mom," he said, his voice low but shaking. "You can't do that. You promised." I held up my hand. "I promised," I interrupted, "when I was treated like family, not when I was treated like a joke." He opened his mouth to argue, but I could see he didn't even know where to start. Amanda slammed the counter. "This is unbelievable. Do you know how embarrassing this is going to be? They already sent a notice." Her face turned red as she looked at the letter again, her eyes wide with panic. "They said if it's not paid immediately, Thomas will lose his spot." I just nodded, as calm as if she'd been talking about the weather. "Well," I said gently, "maybe it's time he learns that money doesn't grow on Grandma's back." That line landed like a punch. Richard ran a hand through his hair, muttering, "This can't be happening." Thomas, poor thing, was sitting at the table, looking from one adult to another, his eyes wide and glassy. "Grandma, did I do something bad?" he asked quietly. And that right there, that broke me a little. I knelt beside him, brushing his hair back gently. "No, sweetheart," I said softly. "You didn't do anything bad. Sometimes adults have to learn lessons too." He frowned, confused, and I kissed his forehead. "You'll be okay." Behind me, Amanda scoffed. Oh, please. You're making this sound noble when it's just petty. I stood up slowly, turned to face her, and said, No, Amanda. It's not petty to demand respect. It's overdue. The look on her face, a mix of shock and rage, almost made me laugh. She wasn't used to me talking back. None of them were. Richard tried to regain control like he always does. Mom, listen. We can fix this. I'll just move some things around, pay the balance, and next month you can resume the transfer. I smiled faintly. There won't be a next month. What do you mean? He said, his voice rising. I said clearly, I'm done paying for a household that treats me like a burden. If you want your son in that fancy school, you'll have to pay for it yourselves. The color drained from his face. He opened his mouth, then shut it, realizing there was nothing left to say. Amanda grabbed her keys and stormed out of the kitchen, muttering something about calling the school. Thomas started crying quietly, and my heart twisted. I didn't want him to feel pain. Not really. But I knew this was necessary. This family had forgotten the value of kindness, of gratitude. They needed a wake-up call. And sometimes the loudest message comes from silence, from absence. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. They couldn't laugh this off. They couldn't scroll past it. They had to see me, hear me, acknowledge me. Richard finally looked at me, really looked at me. Not like a live-in helper, not like some fragile old woman, but like the mother who raised him, sacrificed for him, and just reminded him who I truly was. Mom, he said quietly, why would you do this? I took a deep breath. Because, Richard, I said, when love turns into entitlement, it's no longer love. It's time to remind this family where the love came from and what happens when it's taken for granted. He didn't answer. He just stood there, shoulders slumped, eyes distant. I turned back to the sink, rinsed my cup again, and said softly, Now, if you'll excuse me, I have cookies to bake. And as the oven warmed behind me, the air still thick with silence and disbelief, I realized something powerful. For the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel small. I felt heard. The storm had finally broken, and I was standing right in the middle of it, calm, steady, and unshaken. When evening came, the house remained unnaturally quiet. No television blaring, no phones pinging with notifications, no forced laughter for videos. Just the sound of footsteps, doors closing, occasional hushed arguments between Richard and Amanda that they thought I couldn't hear. I sat in the garden watching the sunset, something I hadn't done in years. There was a peace in the chaos, a certainty in the uncertainty. Whatever happened next, I had reclaimed something precious. My voice, my dignity, my place in this family, not as a convenience, but as a person deserving of respect. Thomas found me there sitting in the old wicker chair that had belonged to Robert. He stood at the edge of the patio, hesitant, unsure. Can I sit with you, Grandma? He asked, his voice small. I patted the space beside me. Always sunshine. He climbed up, folding his lanky body into the chair next to mine. We sat in silence for a while, watching the sky turn from blue to gold to pink. No phones, no poses, no scripts, just being. Dad says I might have to go to a different school, he finally said. Yes, that's likely true. He picked at a loose thread on his shirt. Is it because of the money? Such adult concerns for a child. Partly, I admitted. But mostly it's because some things needed to change in our family. Like the slapping, he asked, surprising me with his perception. I nodded. Like the slapping, and the laughing afterwards, and the videos that make people feel bad. He leaned against me, his head on my shoulder. I don't want to make people feel bad. I know, Sunshine, that's not who you really are. As the fireflies began to twinkle in the garden, Thomas whispered something that made my old heart crack wide open with love. I think I'd rather be real with you than famous with Mom. I wrapped my arm around him and held him close, this precious boy, standing at a crossroads he shouldn't have to navigate at 10 years old. Then that's what we'll be. Real. And as the stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky, I felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, this lesson would reach beyond the tuition bill, beyond the immediate crisis. Maybe it would plant a seed of change that would grow into something beautiful, a family built on respect and love rather than appearances and followers. Only time would tell. But for now, in this quiet moment with my grandson's weight warm against my side, it was enough to have been heard at last. The storm wasn't over, but I had found my strength in its eye, and I would not surrender it again. For 3 long days, not a single word was spoken in that house. No laughter, no chatter, not even the usual bickering between Richard and Amanda. The silence was thick. You could almost hear it pressing against the walls. Amanda clanged pots and slammed cabinets like punctuation marks of her anger. Richard's sulked eyes glued to his phone, pretending he had nothing to say. And little Thomas, he stayed unusually quiet. No mischief, no laughter, just a soft, watchful silence. It was as if everyone was waiting for me to crack, to apologize, to undo what I'd done. But I didn't. In fact, I slept better than I had in months. You see, sometimes peace doesn't come from everyone liking you. Sometimes it comes from finally being respected, even if that respect starts in silence. On the 4th morning, I heard a knock on my door, not a hard, impatient one, but a soft, hesitant tap. "Come in," I spoke, folding my quilt. Richard stepped inside, looking different somehow. His shoulders drooped, his face tired. "Mom," his voice barely audible, "we got Thomas into public school. It's not as fancy, but we'll manage." His tone carried something I hadn't heard in years. Humility. I nodded, keeping my voice steady. "Good, that's what parents are supposed to do." He paused, waiting for me to scold or gloat, but I didn't. There was no need. The lesson was already unfolding on its own. Richard lingered in the doorway, uncertainty written across his face. The thing is, he shifted his weight from one foot to the other. We had to take out a second mortgage on the house to cover some other expenses. I didn't realize how much we were depending on your help. Ah, there it was. The truth, beneath the entitlement. They hadn't just been taking my tuition payments for granted. They'd built their entire financial house on my silent generosity. "I'm sorry to hear that." I kept my tone neutral, not unkind, but not yielding either. "Yeah, well." Richard ran his fingers through his hair, a gesture so like his father it made my heart ache. "Amanda's pretty upset. She had to cancel the family vacation to Aspen, the one she's been posting about for months. Of course, the carefully curated social media life was crumbling without my financial scaffolding. Life is full of disappointments," I said softly. "It's how we handle them that matters." He looked up sharply as if expecting sarcasm, but found none. Just a simple truth offered without malice. "I guess," he mumbled, then straightened his shoulders with what looked like tremendous effort. "Anyway, I just wanted you to know that we're figuring it out. You don't have to worry about Thomas." I never worried about Thomas. I met his eyes steadily. I worried about what he was learning from us. Richard flinched as if I'd struck him, a reaction far stronger than if I'd shouted or accused. The quiet truth cut deeper than any argument could. He left without another word, closing the door with exaggerated gentleness. I returned to folding my laundry, the weight of 30 years of motherhood settling around my shoulders. It had never been easy raising him alone after Robert died. But it had been simple in a way. Just the two of us against the world, my whole heart focused on giving him a good life. When had that clarity been lost? When had my love transformed from nurturing into enabling? Perhaps it was when Richard married Amanda with her expensive tastes and constant need for affirmation. Or maybe it was earlier when he got his first big promotion and started treating money as something to display rather than something to steward. Somewhere along the way, my quiet support had become expected rather than appreciated. Later that morning, I found Thomas sitting alone at the kitchen table, a bowl of untouched cereal in front of him. His eyes were red-rimmed, his normally energetic demeanor subdued. I sat across from him, sliding a plate of freshly cut apple slices his way. "Rough morning," he nodded, pushing the cereal around with his spoon. "Mom's really mad. She keeps saying everything is ruined and that we have to downgrade our lifestyle because of you." The words stung not because they were unexpected, but because Amanda had laid this burden on a child. That must be hard to hear. I kept my voice gentle. Thomas looked up, his eyes wide with confusion. "But I don't understand. If we don't have money for private school, why did we buy a boat last month?" My heart sank. A boat, of course. Another status symbol purchased on the assumption that Grandma would keep covering the essentials. Sometimes adults don't make the best choices. I chose my words carefully. We get confused about what's really important. "Like followers?" Thomas asked with surprising insight. "Like followers?" I agreed. "And likes and comments from strangers." He nodded solemnly. "Mom cried yesterday because she lost 100 followers after she had to post that we weren't going to Aspen anymore. The absurdity of it, crying over digital strangers while your real family fractures around you. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Real life is messy sometimes, sunshine, but it's more valuable than any perfect picture. Dad said I have to start at Jefferson Elementary next week. Thomas poked at an apple slice. He says the kids there are different and that I shouldn't tell them about our house or the country club. Classism, another lovely lesson they were imparting. The only differences that matter between people are kindness and character, I corrected gently. You'll find good friends anywhere if you look for good hearts instead of brand names. He considered this his young mind processing a value system so different from what he'd been taught. But what if they don't like me? My heart squeezed. Beneath all the privilege and posturing was just a little boy afraid of rejection. Then they're missing out on knowing someone pretty special, I winked. And the right friends will find you eventually. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Progress small but real. The morning stretched into afternoon, and I found myself in the garden weeding the tomato patch Robert had planted 15 years ago. I'd maintained it every summer since his death, a living memorial more meaningful than any granite headstone. My hands worked automatically, pulling invasive vines away from the fruit-heavy plants, my mind wandering through memories. I didn't notice Amanda until her shadow fell across the soil beside me. She stood awkwardly at the edge of the garden designer sandals, ill-suited for the earth, her perfectly manicured fingers clutching her ever-present phone. Richard said we should talk. Her voice carried none of its usual confident authority. I sat back on my heels, wiping soil from my hands onto my gardening apron. All right. She shifted uncomfortably in the silence that followed, clearly waiting for me to make this easier for her. I didn't. Some conversations needed to be earned. Look. Impatience crept into her tone. This whole situation is completely over the top. So Thomas slapped you. Kids do thoughtless things all the time. It wasn't personal. The audacity of it stole my breath for a moment. Not personal, I finally managed. How is a hand across my face not personal, Amanda? She rolled her eyes, the gesture so dismissive it made my skin prickle with anger. It was for content. Just a silly video. Everyone does stuff like that online. Everyone, I stood slowly, my aging knees protesting. Everyone films their children disrespecting their elders for entertainment. Oh, please, Amanda's voice dripped condescension. It's not that serious. My followers would have loved it. Do you know how much engagement good videos get? How much money they can generate? I looked at her. Really looked at her. The carefully applied makeup, the artfully casual but expensive outfit, the practiced expressions. Everything about her was curated for an audience manufactured for approval. How much? I asked quietly. How much money is my dignity worth? Exactly. She faltered, caught off guard by the directness. That's not... I didn't mean... Yes, you did. I held her gaze. You've turned your family into a product. Your husband, your son, even me. We're all just content to you, aren't we, props in your perfect online life? That's not fair. Amanda's voice rose defensively. My platform is my career. It supports this family. Does it? I raised an eyebrow. Because it seems to me that my retirement savings were supporting this family. At least they were supporting Thomas's education while you and Richard spent on boats and vacations. Her face flushed red with embarrassment or anger, perhaps both. We work hard for what we have. Working hard and spending wisely are two different things. I turned back to my tomatoes, effectively dismissing her. Maybe it's time Thomas learned the difference. Amanda stood there for another moment, seemingly at a loss for words, a rare occurrence. Finally, she huffed dramatically and stalked back toward the house, her exit surely designed for maximum impact, even with an audience of one. I returned to my weeding, but my hands trembled slightly. Confrontation had never been my strong suit. Robert had been the one to handle difficult conversations, to stand firm when principles were at stake. In the years since his death, I'd found it easier to accommodate, to smooth things over, to keep the peace at any cost, even my own self-respect. But some costs were too high. The price of silence had become the integrity of my grandson's character, and that was a price I could no longer pay. Evening brought a fragile truce as we gathered around the dinner table. Richard had ordered pizza, a tacit acknowledgement that Amanda was too upset to cook, though I suspected she rarely did anyway. We ate in uncomfortable silence, the elephant in the room growing larger with every uneaten crust and avoided glance. Finally, Richard cleared his throat. So, Thomas, we're going to tour Jefferson Elementary tomorrow. They say they have a good arts program, so maybe it'll work out for the best. Thomas nodded without enthusiasm, pushing a pepperoni around his plate. Amanda sniffed loudly, her displeasure on full display. I still don't understand why we can't just pay the tuition ourselves. She directed the comment at Richard, but shot a pointed look my way. Richard's face tightened. I told you we're overextended right now. The boat loan, the kitchen renovation, your shopping account. We just don't have the liquidity. Well, maybe if you'd gotten that promotion, instead of letting Peterson take it. Not now, Amanda, Richard cut her off, his eyes darting to Thomas. Too late. The boy's shoulders hunched further, the weight of adult problems settling visibly upon them. My heart ached for him, caught in the crossfire of their financial irresponsibility and bruised pride. Thomas, I spoke gently, did I ever tell you about the time your grandfather and I had to start over? He looked up, interest flickering in his eyes. No. When was that? After the factory closed in '85. Your grandfather lost his job of 20 years, and suddenly we had no income. You father was about your age. Richard stilled his pizza slice halfway to his mouth. This wasn't a story I told often. The year of struggle had been a point of shame for Robert, though it shouldn't have been. What did you do? Thomas leaned forward. We downsized. I smiled at the memory. Moved from our nice house to a little apartment. Sold our second car. I took a job at the library, and your grandfather worked nights as a security guard while applying for better positions during the day. Were you sad? Thomas's innocent question cut to the heart of it. About losing things, I shook my head. Not really. We were worried, of course, but we had each other. We played board games instead of going to movies. We picnicked in the park instead of eating at restaurants. And you know what? Those are some of my favorite memories, I smiled. Because we were together, really together, not distracted by things. Amanda made a small, derisive sound. That's a nice story, Margaret, but it's not exactly relevant to today's world. You can't survive on family game nights in 2025. Perhaps not, I acknowledged. But you can survive on a lot less than you think, and you can thrive by valuing what matters. Richard was quiet, his eyes distant. I wondered if he remembered that year. The small apartment, the homemade Halloween costumes, the Christmas with just one present each, but so much laughter. Had I failed him by giving him too much afterward, by trying to compensate for that lean time with later abundance? After dinner, I found him alone on the back porch, staring at nothing in particular as twilight settled around the yard. I sat beside him, the weathered porch swing creaking beneath our combined weight. You never told me it was that bad, he spoke after a long silence. After Dad lost his job. It wasn't bad, I corrected gently. It was challenging, but not bad. But you had to sell so much. Take that job at the library, and Dad working nights. Richard shook his head. You always made it seem like everything was fine. Everything was fine. I patted his hand. We adjusted. That's what responsible adults do when circumstances change. He flinched at the word responsible, as if it had struck a particular nerve. I thought I was being responsible. His voice dropped. Providing the best for my family. The best school for Thomas, the best neighborhood, the best opportunities. The best things in life can't be bought, I offered the old cliché with complete sincerity. Easy for you to say, a flash of the old resentment surfaced. You're not the one who has to tell your son he can't go to the same school as his friends anymore. No, I acknowledged. I was just the one who had to tell your father we couldn't afford to send you to soccer camp the summer after the layoff. And you know what you said when I told you. Richard looked up, genuinely curious. What, you said that's okay, Mom. We can practice in the park instead. And we did. Every evening that summer, your father would take you to the park after his day of job hunting before he had to leave for his night shift. You never complained once. His eyes widened with the recovered memory. I remember that. Dad teaching me penalty kicks until it was too dark to see the ball. You were a remarkable 10-year-old. I squeezed his hand. Thomas can be too if you show him how to handle disappointment with grace. Richard sat with that for a moment, the chirping of evening crickets filling the silence between us. I've made a mess of things, haven't I? His voice so quiet I almost missed it. Not a mess. I chose my words carefully. A detour, maybe, but detours can lead to beautiful places if you navigate them well. He nodded slowly, then stood with newfound resolve. I should go talk to Thomas. Really talk to him, not just tell him how it's going to be. As he walked inside, I remained on the swing, gently rocking as stars emerged in the darkening sky. One conversation wouldn't fix everything, but it was a start. A crack in the facade, a glimmer of the man I'd raised breaking through the man he'd become. The next morning brought rain-fat droplets racing down the kitchen windows as we prepared for the day. Thomas sat at the table in his new school clothes, not the designer outfit Amanda had originally planned for Westfield Academy, but still perfectly nice jeans and a button-down shirt from a department store. "You look very handsome." I set a plate of eggs in front of him. He poked at them without enthusiasm. "Mom says Jefferson Elementary is where poor people go." My spatula paused mid-air. "Did she now?" Thomas nodded solemnly. "She said I shouldn't tell anyone about our pool or the country club because they'll be jealous and might try to use me for playdates." The casual cruelty of it, the deliberate othering of children based on their parents' income, it made my blood simmer. "Thomas, look at me." I sat across from him. "There are all kinds of people in this world. Some have more money, some have less. But that has nothing to do with their value as human beings. Do you understand?" He frowned, considering. "But Mom says, your mother is wrong about this," I cut in firmly. "Some of the finest people I've ever known had very little money, and some of the worst had plenty." The back door opened and Richard stepped in, shaking rain from his umbrella. He caught the tail end of our conversation and had the grace to look ashamed. "Your grandmother is right." He hung his jacket by the door. "Jefferson is a good school with good kids. Don't let anyone tell you different." Amanda appeared in the doorway, arms crossed defensively. "I never said they weren't good kids. I just said they're different. That's just reality." "The reality," Richard's voice held an edge I'd rarely heard him use with her, "is that we can't afford Westfield anymore. So maybe we should stop acting like we're somehow better than the families who've been sending their kids to Jefferson all along." Amanda's eyes widened in shock at his defiance. She opened her mouth, closed it, then spun on her heel and disappeared back upstairs. A moment later, a door slammed emphatically. Richard sighed, rubbing his temples. "She's been on the phone with her followers all morning, playing the victim. Apparently we're going through a season of financial challenge that she's bravely facing with grace and authenticity. The irony might have been funny if it weren't so sad." "Give her time," I advised. "Change is hard for everyone." "Yeah, well," Richard poured himself coffee. "We've got the tour at Jefferson at 9. Do you want to come with us?" The invitation surprised me. "Are you sure yes?" He nodded firmly. "Your family. And besides," a faint smile touched his lips, "I could use the moral support." As we drove to Jefferson Elementary, Thomas sat between Richard and me in the back seat, Amanda having refused to come at the last minute, his leg bouncing with nervous energy. "What if nobody likes me?" His voice small and uncertain. "They will," Richard reassured him. "Just be yourself." "But who is that?" Thomas looked genuinely confused. "At Westfield, I was the kid with the cool sneakers and the newest phone, but I won't have those things anymore." My heart broke at how thoroughly his identity had been tied to possessions. "You're so much more than what you own." I squeezed his hand. "You're kind, you're funny, you're curious about the world. You love building with Legos and reading adventure stories and making chocolate chip cookies with your old grandma. And you're really good at soccer," Richard added. "I bet they have a team you could join." A tentative smile curved Thomas's lips. "I am pretty good, aren't I?" "The best." Richard ruffled his hair with genuine affection, a gesture I hadn't seen in far too long. Jefferson Elementary turned out to be a pleasant surprise. The building was older than Westfield, but well-maintained, with colorful student artwork lining the hallways and friendly staff who greeted Thomas with genuine warmth. The principal, Dr. Chen, took us on a personal tour, pointing out the library, the computer lab, and the music room with obvious pride. "We may not have all the bells and whistles of some private schools," she smiled as Thomas's eyes widened at the science lab display, "but we have exceptional teachers who are passionate about what they do." As we walked the halls, I noticed Richard's posture gradually relaxing. He asked thoughtful questions about the curriculum and extracurricular activities, engaging with Dr. Chen as an equal rather than someone evaluating a lesser option. The transformation was most dramatic in Thomas, who went from reluctant to excited as he discovered the school's robotics club and extensive art program. By the time we reached the playground, he was chattering animatedly about the upcoming science fair. "Can I really join the robotics team even though school's already started?" He tugged on Dr. Chen's sleeve, his earlier reserve completely evaporated. Of course, she laughed. They meet on Wednesdays after school. I think you'd be a wonderful addition. In the car ride home, Thomas's enthusiasm bubbled over. Did you see their library? It's way bigger than Westfield's, and they have a 3D printer in the science lab, and Mrs. Rodriguez said they're doing a unit on space exploration next month. Richard caught my eye over Thomas's head, a mixture of relief and something like wonder on his face. Neither of us had expected this outcome, this genuine excitement about a school that just yesterday had been discussed as a disappointment, a downgrade. Sounds like you might enjoy Jefferson after all. Richard's voice warm with affection. Yeah, Thomas nodded vigorously. And the kids seemed nice. There was a boy in the hall who had a Star Wars backpack just like I wanted last year, but Mom said it was too common and got me the designer one instead. Another small revelation, another piece of evidence that the values being instilled were warped. Richard winced visibly. Well, he cleared his throat. Maybe we can look for a Star Wars backpack this weekend, if that's what you'd like. Thomas's face lit up. Really? But what about the Gucci one Mom already bought for this year? I think Richard chose his words deliberately. It might stay in the closet for now. Some things aren't appropriate for everyday use. It was a small step, but a significant one. Richard actively redirecting away from status symbols, making decisions independent of Amanda's influence. I squeezed his shoulder briefly, a silent acknowledgement of the courage such a shift required. When we arrived home, Amanda was waiting in the living room, her expression carefully composed. She'd clearly been crying, but her makeup was freshly applied, her hair styled. Ever camera-ready, even in distress. How did it go? Her tone forcibly light. Thomas launched into an excited recounting of everything he'd seen from the music room to the playground. Amanda listened with a fixed smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, nodding at appropriate intervals. Well, that's nice, she managed when he paused for breath. I'm glad it wasn't completely terrible. Richard shot her a warning look. It's more than nice. It's a good school. Thomas is excited about it. Of course he is. Amanda's smile tightened. He's making the best of a bad situation. That's what we're all doing, isn't it? The barb was aimed at me, but I let it pass without reaction. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about Thomas and what kind of person he would become under their guidance. I'm going to join the robotics team, Thomas continued, either missing or ignoring the tension. And they have a soccer team too. Tryouts are next week. Wonderful. Amanda's voice dripped in sincerity. I'm sure the equipment will be adequate. Richard stiffened beside me. Amanda? His voice carried a warning edge. That's enough. She blinked in surprise. Clearly she wasn't accustomed to him setting boundaries. I'm just saying, no, Richard cut her off firmly. You're being elitist and teaching Thomas the wrong values. It needs to stop. The room fell silent. Thomas looked between his parents with wide eyes, sensing the significance of the moment. Amanda's carefully composed expression cracked raw hurt and anger bleeding through. So this is how it's going to be. Her voice trembled. You're taking her side. This isn't about sides, Richard spoke with calm I hadn't known he possessed. This is about doing what's best for our son. Amanda stood abruptly, grabbing her purse from the sofa. I need some air. Don't wait up. The front door slammed behind her with finality, leaving a ringing silence in her wake. Thomas looked up at his father, uncertainty written across his young face. Is Mom mad at me for liking Jefferson? Richard knelt to his level, placing steady hands on his shoulders. No, buddy. Mom is just having a hard time with change right now. She'll come around. Thomas nodded, but doubt lingered in his eyes. Is it my fault because I slapped Grandma and then everything went bad? The innocent question cut through the room like a blade. Richard looked stricken, unprepared to navigate such emotional complexity. I stepped forward, joining them on the floor despite my protesting knees. Thomas, listen to me. None of this is your fault. Adults made adult decisions that had consequences. You're just a child who did what the adults around you encouraged. But I hurt you. His voice wavered. Yes, I acknowledged. And that was wrong. But the people who should have taught you better, we failed you. And now we're trying to do better. Richard's eyes filled with unexpected tears. Your grandmother's right. I should have stopped it. I should have taught you better. Thomas looked between us, processing this complex emotional landscape with remarkable perception for his age. So everyone made mistakes. Everyone, Richard confirmed. Even grandmas and dads and moms, especially moms and dads. And now we're fixing them. We're trying to, I smiled gently. That's what good people do when they realize they've made a mistake. They try to fix it and do better next time. Thomas considered this, then nodded with the simple acceptance children often bring to life's complications. I think I'm going to like Jefferson, and maybe Mom will too once she sees it. Richard pulled him into a tight hug. I hope so, buddy. I really hope so. After Thomas went to bed that night, I found Richard sitting at the kitchen table staring at a spreadsheet on his laptop, his face illuminated by the harsh blue light. Papers were scattered around him. Bills, bank statements, credit card statements. A paper trail of financial irresponsibility laid bare. That bad? I set a cup of tea beside him. He rubbed his eyes wearily. Worse. We're underwater on practically everything. The boat, the cars, the house. Amanda's influencer income doesn't come close to covering what we spend. And your salary goes to minimums on the credit cards mostly. He closed the laptop with a defeated sigh. I don't know how we got here, Mom. It just seemed to happen so gradually. A little more debt here, another purchase there, always telling ourselves we'd figure it out next month. I nodded, understanding all too well how financial quicksand could pull you under before you realized you were sinking. What will you do now? I don't know, he admitted. The boat has to go. Probably one of the cars, too. I've been looking at financial counseling programs, but Amanda... He trailed off. Isn't on board, I suggested gently. A humorless laugh escaped him. That's putting it mildly. She says downgrading our lifestyle will kill her influencer brand. That her followers expect a certain image. And what do you expect? I asked. What do you want your life to look like, Richard? Not for her followers, not for appearances. For you and Thomas. He stared into his tea as if the answer might be found in its depths. He started slowly. I want Thomas to grow up understanding what matters. I want him to be kind and resilient and grateful. I want to stop feeling this constant pressure to keep up with some imaginary standard. Then that's your North Star, I squeezed his hand. Let that guide your decisions, not fear of what others might think. Richard nodded, a weight seeming to lift from his shoulders at the simple clarity. When did you get so wise, Mom? Oh, around the time I turned 65 and got slapped by my grandson. I winked, drawing a reluctant smile from him. I'm sorry about that. Remorse clouded his features. I should have stopped it. I should have done 100 things differently. Yes, I agreed without rancor. But the past is finished. It's what you do now that counts. He sat up straighter, resolution hardening his features. I'm going to fix this. All of it. The finances, the values we're teaching Thomas, the way we've treated you. I just hope it's not too late. It's never too late to change course, I smiled. Just ask a woman who canceled a tuition payment at 65. The kitchen fell silent, but it was a different quality of silence than the tense, angry void of previous days. This was a thoughtful silence, pregnant with possibility and the fragile hope of new beginnings. Outside, a car pulled into the driveway, Amanda returning from wherever she'd gone to lick her wounds. Richard tensed, visibly bracing for another confrontation. One step at a time. I patted his shoulder as I rose. Rome wasn't built in a day, and families aren't rebuilt overnight either. As I headed to my room, leaving Richard to face whatever came next, I felt lighter somehow. Not because everything was fixed, far from it. The road ahead would be rocky and uncertain. But for the first time in years, we were walking it with open eyes, acknowledging the potholes instead of pretending they didn't exist. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't standing firm in a storm. Sometimes it's admitting the foundation beneath you is cracked and having the courage to rebuild it, brick by stubborn brick, into something that can truly weather whatever comes. Days turned into weeks, and little by little the tension in the house began to melt. I noticed something I hadn't seen in a long time. Thomas was changing. Gone were the designer shoes and fancy backpacks. He wasn't bragging about field trips or showing off gadgets. Instead, he talked about new friends, about a teacher who loved art, about how he helped another boy who forgot his lunch. His laughter sounded different, lighter, more real. For the first time, I saw the boy I'd held as a baby, not the one shaped by entitlement, but the one born from love. The first day at Jefferson Elementary had been harder on Amanda than on Thomas. She'd worn oversized sunglasses and refused to get out of the car during drop-off, claiming she had a migraine. But Thomas had marched through those public school doors with his head held high, a confidence born not from his possessions, but from something deeper stirring within him. When he came home that afternoon, his eyes were bright with excitement. "Grandma, I made 2 friends already. Mason has a collection of rocks from all over the country, and Ava knows everything about space." Amanda had hovered in the background. Her smile strained as she filmed his excitement for the memory book, though I suspected it was more for her carefully curated content about embracing change with grace. Even in difficulty, she found ways to perform. But as days passed, even Amanda's resistance began to soften around the edges. I caught her listening with genuine interest as Thomas chattered about his robotics club project. She still complained about the downgrade when she thought I couldn't hear, but there was less venom in it, more resignation giving way to acceptance. Richard transformed most dramatically. Gone was the distracted father perpetually glued to his phone. He started coming home earlier, helping Thomas with homework, throwing the soccer ball in the backyard, until dusk made it impossible to see. One evening I passed the living room to find them bent over a pile of Legos, working together on some elaborate structure, both entirely absorbed in the moment. No phones, no cameras, no audience, just father and son connecting in the simple joy of creation. The boat went first sold at a significant loss, but still providing breathing room in their finances. Then one of the luxury cars replaced with a sensible sedan that Richard claimed was actually more comfortable anyway. Small steps toward financial stability, each met with resistance from Amanda, but quiet determination from Richard. One afternoon I was sitting by the window knitting when I heard a soft knock. "Come in," I called, expecting Amanda to ask about dinner plans, but it was Thomas clutching something in his hand, a crumpled drawing. "Grandma," his voice shy and uncertain, "I made this for you." He handed it to me, eyes downcast. On the paper, drawn in shaky crayon lines, was a picture of the 2 of us holding hands under a big, bright sun. Across the top, in uneven letters, he'd written, "Me and Grandma." My throat tightened as emotion welled up. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." My voice barely a whisper. He hesitated for a moment, then said so softly I almost missed it, "I'm sorry I hit you." Those 5 little words broke me and healed me all at once. I pulled him close, holding him tight against my heart. "Thank you, baby." Tears slipping down my cheeks. "That means everything to me. Mrs. Peterson says apologizing is important when we hurt someone." He continued, his face pressed against my shoulder. "Even if it was a long time ago." "Mrs. Peterson sounds very wise." I stroked his hair gently. "She is." He pulled back, his expression earnest. "She says what matters isn't being perfect, but trying to be better every day. I want to be better, Grandma." Oh, sunshine, my heart overflowing with love for this remarkable child. You already are. This right here was the kind of education no private school could ever give. Not math or science or manners rehearsed for show, but humanity, empathy, and love. As weeks passed, Heather began to soften too. She wasn't as sharp, her tone gentler, her glances less cold. I found her one morning staring at her phone in the kitchen, an untouched cup of coffee beside her. "Everything okay?" I asked, reaching for the kettle. She looked up, surprise flickering across her face. We'd developed a careful politeness in recent weeks, but rarely sought each other out for conversation. "My follower count dropped below 50,000, her voice hollow. "I've been losing them steadily since everything changed." I poured my tea, considering my response carefully. "Does that matter so much?" She gave a short, humorless laugh. "It's my entire identity, my career, my purpose." The last word came out small and uncertain, as if she was questioning it even as she said it. "Is it, though?" I sat across from her. "Is that really all you are, a number on a screen?" You wouldn't understand, her defenses rising. "Your generation didn't live online." "True," I acknowledged. "But we still had to figure out who we were apart from what others thought of us. That's not a generational challenge. It's a human one." She fiddled with her phone, turning it face down on the table in an uncharacteristic gesture. I don't know who I am without this vulnerability creeping into her voice. Before the followers, the sponsors, the constant validation, I was nobody. My heart softened toward her for perhaps the first time. Beneath the polished exterior and sharp edges was a young woman desperately afraid of disappearing. "You're Thomas's mother," I reminded her gently. "Richard's wife, a daughter, a friend. Those relationships are real in a way followers can never be. Her eyes filled with unexpected tears. But I'm failing at all of those too. Thomas likes his new school better than the one I wanted for him. Richard is making decisions without me. My parents think I've been shallow and irresponsible. Change is hard. I reached across the table, not quite touching her hand, but offering the possibility. But it's also an opportunity. She looked at my outstretched hand for a long moment before speaking again. Why are you being nice to me, after everything? The slap the way I treated you. Because I've lived long enough to know that most people aren't just one thing. I smiled faintly. We're all capable of growth, of surprising ourselves. Amanda didn't take my hand, but she didn't pull away either. A small truce in the quiet morning light, fragile but real. That evening, Richard came home with unexpected news. They're offering me a promotion at work. Excitement brightening his features as he hung up his coat. Senior project manager. It means longer hours initially, but better pay and more stability long term. That's wonderful, I embraced him warmly. You've earned it. It's because of the Hendricks proposal, he explained. The one I stayed up working on instead of going to that influencer gala with Amanda last month. Turns out focusing on actual work instead of networking has its benefits. Amanda appeared in the doorway, having overheard. A complicated expression crossed her face, pride warring with resentment. Congratulations, she offered finally, her tone genuine if subdued. Thank you. Richard's surprise at her reaction evident. I know it's not as flashy as the startup opportunities I've chased before, but it's solid. Dependable. Dependable is good, Amanda conceded, then added with unexpected self-awareness. We could use more of that around here. Richard's eyebrows shot up, but he wisely chose not to comment on her moment of humility. I thought we could celebrate this weekend. Maybe take Thomas fishing at Lake Crawford, nothing fancy, just the three of us enjoying the day. Fishing? Amanda wrinkled her nose instinctively, then caught herself. I mean, I've never been fishing. Neither have I actually, Richard admitted with a laugh. But Thomas has been reading this book about outdoor adventures from the school library, and he's been dropping hints. I thought it might be fun to try something new together. A month ago, Amanda would have flatly refused such a proposal. Designer clothes and manicured nails didn't mix with worms and fish scales. But now she hesitated, conflict visible on her face. You should join them, I encouraged gently. Some of the best content is unscripted, isn't that what they say? A flicker of understanding passed between us. I wasn't mocking her profession, but suggesting a bridge between her old priorities and new possibilities. I suppose I could document City Mom Tries Fishing or something. She mused, the influencer instinct not entirely abandoned. People do like authenticity and new experiences. They certainly do. I agreed, mentally celebrating this small victory. She was still viewing life through a content lens, but at least she was considering participating in a family activity without designer labels or perfectly staged settings. Richard seemed stunned by her tentative agreement, quickly recovering to preserve the moment. Great, I'll pick up some gear tomorrow. As he headed off to share the news with Thomas, Amanda lingered, an unasked question hovering in the air between us. What is it? I prompted gently. She twisted her wedding ring nervously. I don't know how to do this. Any of it. The public school mom thing, the budget-conscious wife thing, the regular person thing. The vulnerability in her admission touched me. No one expects you to transform overnight, I assured her. Change is a process, not an event. What if I'm not good at being normal? Fear flickered in her eyes. What if I lose everything? The followers, the sponsors, the lifestyle, and still don't fit in with regular moms at Jefferson Elementary? Then you'll find your own way, I smiled. The beauty of being authentic is that there's no script to follow, no performance to perfect. Just one day at a time, being a little more yourself and a little less what others expect. She absorbed this uncertainty still etched in her features, but perhaps a glimmer of possibility too. I should go help Thomas with his homework, she said finally, an ordinary mother's task spoken like someone testing unfamiliar words. He'd like that, I encouraged, watching her walk away with straighter shoulders, a woman tentatively stepping into a new version of herself. The fishing trip proved transformative in ways none of us could have predicted. They returned, sunburned and disheveled. Amanda's carefully applied makeup long since surrendered to sweat and lake water, but all three wore expressions of genuine joy I hadn't seen in years. Grandma, I caught 3 fish. Thomas burst through the door holding up a photo on Richard's phone. Dad says they were too small to keep, but we took pictures. They were definitely keepers in the memory department. Richard ruffled his hair affectionately. And I only freaked out a little when Thomas made me touch the worm, Amanda added, holding up her chipped manicure with something like pride. Turns out I'm tougher than I thought. She really was a good sport. Richard's arm slipped naturally around her waist, an unconscious gesture of reconnection. Even when the boat rental guy gave us the oldest, creakiest rowboat in the fleet. It had character, Amanda laughed. A real laugh, not the practiced social media chuckle she usually employed. And it didn't sink, which was my main concern. They moved into the kitchen together, a united family recounting their adventure, finishing each other's sentences, and gently teasing one another about minor mishaps. I stayed in the background witnessing this healing unfold with quiet joy. No directors, no scripts, no audience beyond these four walls. Just authentic connection blooming from the soil of shared experience. That night I found Thomas sitting on the back porch steps, gazing up at the stars with uncharacteristic stillness for a 10-year-old boy. Mind some company. I eased down beside him, my knees protesting the movement. I was thinking about something Mrs. Peterson said in class today. He leaned against my side comfortably. About how sometimes the bad stuff that happens can lead to good stuff later if you learn from it. Mrs. Peterson sounds wiser every day. I smiled. What made you think of that? Well, he chewed his lip thoughtfully. When you stopped paying for Westfield, I thought it was the worst thing ever. But if I still went there, I wouldn't have met Mason or Ava. And Dad and Mom wouldn't have taken me fishing. And Dad would still be on his phone all the time. The wisdom from this child continuously amazed me. That's very insightful, Sunshine. So maybe... He looked up at me, seeking confirmation. Maybe when I slapped you, that was awful, but it made other good things happen eventually, because you taught us an important lesson. I considered his question carefully, aware of the moral complexity. The slap itself was never good, I clarified gently. Hurting people is never the right choice. But yes, sometimes difficult moments can lead to necessary changes if we're brave enough to learn from them. He nodded solemnly. I'm glad you didn't let me keep being a brat. Simple honesty in his voice. Even though it was hard at first. Sometimes the most important lessons are the hardest to learn. I hugged him close. But you've learned so beautifully, Sunshine. Mom's different now, he observed. Not so worried about her phone all the time, and Dad laughs more. I've noticed that too. I agreed, marveling at how perceptive children could be when adults often assumed they didn't notice the undercurrents of family dynamics. Are you still mad at them? His question direct and unfiltered. I considered this, searching my heart honestly. No, I realized with some surprise. I'm not mad anymore. I'm proud of how they're changing and growing. Me too, Thomas declared, then yawned widely. I think I'm going to bed. Fishing is tiring. He stood then, unexpectedly bent to kiss my cheek, a spontaneous gesture of affection that brought tears to my eyes. Good night, Grandma. I love you. I love you too, Sunshine, more than all the stars in that sky. As his footsteps faded into the house, I remained on the porch, savoring the cool evening air and the sense of rightness that had been missing for so long. Not perfection. There were still tense moments, still adjustments being navigated daily, but authenticity. A family finding its way back to its foundations, brick by wobbly brick. 2 days later, Amanda surprised us all by announcing she'd enrolled in a financial literacy course at the community college. The advisor says I could even get a certificate in business management if I take a few more classes, she explained over dinner, a nervous excitement in her voice. I thought it might help me build my platform in a more sustainable way. That's fantastic. Richard's genuine pride evident. You've always had a knack for connecting with people. Those skills could translate to all sorts of opportunities. Maybe, she ducked her head, uncharacteristically modest. Anyway, it's just 2 evenings a week. I can still handle Thomas's school stuff and everything else. I can help with Thomas those evenings. I offered, expecting resistance, but receiving a grateful smile instead. That would be great, Margaret. Thank you. The simple courtesy, the absence of defensive edges or passive-aggressive undertones, these small shifts spoke volumes about the journey we'd all undertaken since that fateful slap. Later that week, I discovered Richard in the garage late at night, hunched over Robert's old workbench that had gone unused since his death. Curious, I paused in the doorway, watching as he carefully sanded a small wooden object. Dad's old tools still work perfectly. He spoke without looking up, somehow sensing my presence. All these years and they just needed a little oil and attention. I stepped closer, seeing a small wooden boat taking shape under his hands. "What are you making?" "A model sailboat for Thomas." Pride infused his voice. "Remember how Dad used to make them for me?" Of course, emotion catching in my throat at the memory. "You'd sail them in the park pond every summer." "I found his old plans in that trunk." Richard nodded toward the corner. "Thought I'd carry on the tradition. Maybe Thomas and I could start going to the pond on Sundays." I touched the half-finished hull gently. "Your father would be so pleased." "Would he?" Uncertainty clouded Richard's features. "After everything I've become, the debt, the materialism, teaching Thomas all the wrong values." "Richard," I placed my hand over his. "Your father understood that life is a journey, not a destination. He would be proud of the course correction of the man you're choosing to become now." He swallowed hard, blinking rapidly. "I keep thinking about that summer after he lost his job. How he never complained, never made us feel the stress he must have been under. He just adapted, found new ways to be happy, to give us what really mattered." "That was his gift." I smiled at the precious memory. "Finding joy in circumstances, not because of them." "I want to be that kind of father to Thomas." Determination hardened his features. "The kind who teaches by example, not just words." "You're already becoming that man." I squeezed his hand. "Every day, one choice at a time." He returned to his sanding, and I left him to the meditative rhythm of woodworking this unexpected inheritance from father to son, spanning decades and generations. Some lessons couldn't be taught in fancy private schools or purchased with tuition payments. They lived in moments like these, quiet, ordinary, profound in their simplicity. The following Sunday morning found me in the kitchen preparing a picnic lunch. Richard had announced at breakfast that they were taking Thomas's newly completed sailboat to the park pond, and to everyone's surprise, Amanda had volunteered to come along. "I thought I'd bring my camera," she'd explained, catching my raised eyebrow. "But the old one not for posting, just for family memories." Another small step in her evolution, this distinction between performative living and simply living. As I packed sandwiches into a cooler, Thomas bounded into the kitchen, excitement radiating from his every movement. "Dad says we might see ducks at the pond. Can we bring bread for them?" Actually, Amanda followed him in, scrolling through her phone. "I just looked it up, and bread isn't good for ducks. It can make them sick. We should bring frozen peas or oats instead." Thomas and I both stared at her in surprise, not at the information itself, but at the fact that she'd researched something simply for its practical value, rather than its aesthetic or social media potential. She glanced up, catching our expressions. "What I can learn new things, defensive but with a hint of humor." "Frozen peas it is." I recovered quickly, pulling a bag from the freezer. "Very thoughtful, Amanda." A flush of pleasure colored her cheeks at the simple praise. These moments of genuine connection were becoming more frequent, the artificial barriers between us dissolving bit by bit in the alchemy of family reconstruction. As they prepared to leave, Richard suddenly snapped his fingers. "I almost forgot. Thomas, can you run and get the picnic blanket from the hall closet?" Once Thomas was out of earshot, Richard turned to me with uncharacteristic nervousness. "Mom, we've been thinking. With my promotion and Amanda's classes, things are stabilizing. We were wondering if you'd consider staying with us permanently, not just as a temporary arrangement." Amanda nodded beside him, her agreement appearing genuine rather than reluctant. "The guest room is yours for as long as you want it. Thomas would be thrilled, and honestly, we could still use your wisdom around here." The invitation touched me deeply, especially coming from both of them together, a united front of genuine inclusion rather than grudging accommodation. "Thank you," genuine emotion warming my voice. "Let me think about it." The truth was, I'd been contemplating my next steps. My small retirement account, freed from tuition payments, would allow me to rent a modest apartment nearby. I'd even circled a few possibilities in the newspaper, thinking perhaps it was time to give this family space to grow on their own terms. But the sincerity in their invitation gave me pause. This wasn't about convenience or finances anymore. This was about choice, about creating a multi-generational household where each member was valued for their presence, not their utility. "Whatever you decide." Richard squeezed my shoulder gently. "This is your home for as long as you want it to be." The afternoon stretched into evening, and I found myself alone in the quiet house, savoring the solitude as I puttered in my beloved tomato garden. The summer heat was beginning to wane, giving way to the gentler warmth of early fall. Soon the first frost would come, and the garden would rest until spring brought new beginnings. How fitting, I thought, that nature's cycles so often mirrored our human journeys. We, too, had weathered a harsh season and emerged into a period of growth and renewal. The sound of laughter heralded the family's return, Thomas's excited voice carrying across the yard as they rounded the corner of the house. "Grandma, my boat sailed all the way across the pond without tipping over." Richard followed, carrying the small wooden vessel with obvious pride. "Natural sailor just like his dad." "And we saw baby ducks," Amanda added, her designer clothes rumpled and casual, a smudge of dirt on her cheek that she either hadn't noticed or didn't mind. "They loved the peas." "Sounds like a perfect day." I smiled, taking in the tableau before me. 3 sunburned faces alight with simple joy, connected by shared experience rather than shared screens. "The best," Thomas agreed fervently. "Can we go again next week? Maybe bring a picnic dinner and stay until sunset?" "I don't see why not." Richard ruffled his hair affectionately. "What do you think, Amanda?" "I think," she said slowly, as if realizing something important, "that I've taken more genuine photos today than I have in years. Not for followers or likes, just for us." She held up her old camera, wonder in her voice. "It feels different." "Better different or worse different?" Richard asked gently. "Just different," she considered. "But good, I think. Real." Thomas tugged at my gardening apron. "Grandma, can we make your special lemonade, the kind with the mint leaves from the garden?" "Of course, sunshine." I brushed soil from my hands. "Let's gather some mint right now." As we moved toward the herb section of the garden, I caught Richard watching us with a tender expression. He caught my eye and mouthed silently, "Thank you." No elaborate speech, needed no dramatic declarations. Just 2 simple words acknowledging the journey we'd traveled together, from that shocking slap to this peaceful evening, from brokenness to healing. Later that night, after Thomas was tucked in bed with dreams of sailing adventures dancing in his head, I sat on the porch swing Robert had built decades ago. The gentle creaking of its chains provided a soothing rhythm as I gazed at the stars emerging in the twilight sky. The screen door opened quietly, and Amanda stepped out, 2 steaming mugs in her hands. She offered one to me without comment, then settled onto the swing beside me, an unprecedented gesture of companionship. We sat in surprisingly comfortable silence, sipping tea and watching fireflies begin their evening dance across the lawn. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft in the gathering darkness. "I was wrong about you, simple, direct, unembellished with excuses or qualifications." I glanced at her, surprised by the frank admission. "Oh, I thought you were judgmental and old-fashioned." She continued, staring into her tea. "That you didn't understand modern parenting or my career or any of it. I resented how Thomas listened to you, how Richard respected your opinion." "And now," I prompted gently when she paused, "now I think maybe you just love this family enough to be honest with us, even when it's hard." She traced the rim of her mug thoughtfully. "Even when it costs you something." The insight stunned me with its perception. "That's exactly it," I acknowledged. "Love isn't always easy or comfortable. Sometimes it's challenging, even confrontational." "I never thought of it that way," Amanda admitted. "I always thought love meant making people happy, giving them what they want." "Sometimes that's true," I nodded. "But sometimes it means giving them what they need instead." She considered this, the porch swing moving gently beneath us. "Like when you canceled Thomas's tuition." "Like that," I agreed. "It wasn't to punish any of you. It was to redirect us all towards something better." "It worked." A reluctant smile tugged at her lips. "Though I wouldn't have admitted that a month ago. Growth takes time." I patted her hand gently. "For all of us." Another comfortable silence settled between us, punctuated only by the chorus of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl. Amanda seemed lost in thought, her profile illuminated by the soft porch light. "I posted something different today," she finally spoke. "Not carefully staged, not filtered, just us. At the pond. Thomas with his boat, Richard showing him how to adjust the sail. Real moments." "How did that feel?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Terrifying," she laughed softly. "And liberating. Like I could breathe properly for the first time in years." "And your followers?" I couldn't help asking. "Mixed reactions." She shrugged an impressively nonchalant gesture for someone who'd built her identity on digital approval. Some unfollowed, but others actually engaged more. Left thoughtful comments about their own family traditions, asked questions about the boat. Authenticity resonates, I suggested, even online. Maybe she considered this. Or maybe I just care a little less about their reactions than I used to. Progress indeed, perhaps the most significant yet. As weeks passed, our family continued its cautious reconstruction. There were setbacks, of course. Amanda occasionally slipping into old patterns of materialism, Richard working late more often than he'd promised, Thomas testing boundaries as children naturally do. But the foundation had shifted, built now on something sturdier than appearances or validation from strangers. One crisp October morning, 6 months after that fateful slap, I found myself back in the garden, harvesting the last of the season's tomatoes. The plants were fading now, their productivity slowing as nature prepared for winter's rest. Still, they offered a final bounty, and I collected each ripe fruit with grateful hands. The sound of the back door opening drew my attention. Thomas bounded down the steps, followed more sedately by Richard and Amanda. "Grandma," Thomas called excitedly, "we have a surprise for you." I straightened, brushing soil from my gardening apron. "A surprise? What's the occasion?" 6 months since everything changed, Richard explained, a meaningful look passing between us. "We wanted to mark it somehow." Amanda held out a small, carefully wrapped package. It was Thomas's idea, but we all contributed. Curious, I unwrapped the paper to find a beautiful leather-bound photo album. Opening the cover, I gasped softly at the first image. A black-and-white photograph of Robert and me on our wedding day, one I thought had been lost in a move decades ago. "How did you find this?" emotion thickening my voice. "Dad had a copy in his old files at work," Richard explained. "I was cleaning out my storage unit last weekend and found a box of his things the company sent after he died." I turned the pages slowly, traveling through time with each carefully preserved memory. Robert holding baby Richard, the 3 of us at the beach, Richard's graduation, Thomas as a newborn. But what struck me most were the newer additions, candid shots from recent months. Thomas sailing his wooden boat, Richard teaching him to bait a fishing hook, Amanda and Thomas baking cookies in the kitchen, all of us together on the porch swing. "We're calling it the reset," Thomas explained proudly, "because that's what we did as a family." "There are empty pages at the end," Amanda pointed out, "for whatever comes next." "It's perfect," tears blurring my vision as I hugged each of them in turn. "Absolutely perfect." "There's one more thing." Richard's voice carried a note of nervous excitement. "We've been talking, all 3 of us, and we'd like to make a change to the household." My heart stuttered momentarily. After all this progress, were they gently preparing to suggest I find my own place? I braced myself, determined to accept whatever came next with grace. "We'd like to convert the den into a proper bedroom for you," Richard continued. "With your own bathroom and a little sitting area, more privacy, more space, more permanent." Relief and joy washed through me in equal measure. "You want me to stay?" "We need you to stay." Amanda's sincerity unmistakable. "Not as a babysitter or tuition provider, as family, as the heart of this home." Thomas nodded eagerly. "And I already picked out paint colors, light blue like the sky. Dad says we can start next weekend." "What do you think?" Richard asked, a touch of vulnerability in his expression. "Would you like that?" Looking at their faces, expectant, hopeful, transformed from what they had been 6 months earlier, I felt a profound sense of completion. Not an ending, but a new beginning rich with possibility and authentic connection. "I would like that very much," my voice steady with certainty. "This is where I belong." And as Thomas whooped with joy, as Richard embraced Amanda with genuine affection, as the autumn sun warmed my garden one last time, before winter's approach, I understood with perfect clarity that sometimes the most profound changes begin with a single painful moment, a slap that breaks the silence, a decision that disrupts the pattern, a lesson wrapped in consequence and delivered with love. The journey hadn't been easy for any of us. There would be more challenges ahead, more growth required, more lessons to learn. But standing there with the family that had rediscovered itself, I felt nothing but gratitude for the difficult path that had led us here. To authenticity, to connection, to the kind of love that doesn't just comfort, but transforms. Some might call it revenge, this reclaiming of respect through consequence. But I knew better. This wasn't about winning or losing, about punishment or retribution. This was about restoration, of dignity, of values, of family bonds strong enough to weather any storm. And as I closed the photo album, my fingers lingering on its leather cover, I smiled at the simple truth I'd learned at 65. Sometimes the greatest gift we can offer those we love isn't silent accommodation, but the courage to say enough and the wisdom to show them a better way.